When you look at Freddie Mercury, what do you see? Do you see an artist? Do you see a man? Do you see one of the best singers in the world, leading thousands along to sing with him? But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe the man that had such a hard job that made it look so easy was really just someone that lived big and loved even bigger, and in the end, when it was all said and done, would die in his home with the love of his life, in a very private and sad setting. This is the story of Freddie Mercury and his complicated love life. In Freddie's later life, he has gone at a speed of traveling the world at 100, singing and having lavish big parties, and living the life of a royal rock star. But now he is at a much slower speed, living in his home in Kingston with his longtime partner, Jim Hutton. The pair were living somewhat of a royal lifestyle. Their house is full of cats, art, and a butler they love and adore. When we go back to Freddie's first love, we find a young, lively Freddie, in love with his first girlfriend that would be with him most of his life, and her name is Mary Austin. Mary was with Freddie before he was the king of the biggest band in the world. They met in 1969, before Queen had even been formed. The two were a couple for a long time. Mary was 19 and Freddie was 24, just living as a couple, doing things that couples do. They spent all their time together, and Mary will even be with Freddie while Queen is being formed, and watch Freddie develop into Freddie Mercury, the world will know in just some short years. With Mary now being with Freddie for some years now, Queen is starting to get attention. They have money, they are traveling. Freddie's love for fancy lifestyle and flamboyant looks are coming out. Mary says she is having her suspicions about Freddie and his double life, and in the mid-70s, Freddie is becoming more distant from Mary in their love life. It's rumored that Freddie is having relationships with men while acting as a straight man in a relationship with Mary. Freddie will even ask Mary to marry him, but the engagement will be called off. December of 1976, Freddie would sit Mary down and have the hardest conversation of his life up to that point. Freddie is scared that he will lose Mary forever. He is still in love with her and does not want to let her go. As he sat Mary down, he began to tell her of his sexuality. It would be the end of their romantic relationship for good. Obviously with this, Mary is heartbroken, but she has had her suspicions for some time, she says. Freddie told Mary that he was bisexual, and Mary's response was that she knew he was a gay man. At that brief moment, this is a very sad moment for Freddie, but it is also a very happy and exciting moment for him. Freddie does not have to keep lying to Mary anymore. Freddie would say this years later in an interview. All my lovers ask me why they couldn't replace Mary, but it's simply impossible. The only friend I've got is Mary, and I don't want anybody else. To me, she is my common law wife. It was a marriage. We believe in each other. That's enough for me. Freddie and Mary will still remain close, very close friends, and Mary will constantly be with Freddie as much as she can be while she's living her own life. Freddie will continue to take care of Mary as much as he can. He will buy her a home and watch over her, and really, Mary still spends a lot of time with Freddie. Now that Freddie is single and is not worried about hurting Mary anymore, this will be a big shift in Freddie's look, personality, and public appearance, in the band and to the world. Freddie is now alive and taking over. Freddie never really says openly of what his sexuality is publicly, but he does make it known that he will not be mocked for how he looks and acts. When Freddie is asked directly in an interview by a reporter, "So how about being bent?" Freddie would look at the person and reply by saying, "You're a crafty cow. Let's put it this way. There are times when I was young and green. It's a thing schoolboys go through. I've had my share of schoolboy pranks. I'm not going to elaborate further." Freddie grew up in a time where same-sex attraction was considered a mental illness and was not accepted in his home. Freddie would keep close contact with his family his whole life. He would never discuss his sexuality to his parents, so much so that Freddie told his parents that the man living in his home in London was his gardener. This man that was supposed to be the gardener would turn out to be Jim Hutton. With Freddie now single and in the biggest band in the world, he is rich, traveling, singing to arenas full of people. Freddie is becoming bigger than life at this point. Coming into the late 70s, early 80s, Freddie is throwing big parties for him and his friends, and all of the guests they invite. While at this time in Freddie's life, he does not have a lot of relationships that last long. It's no secret that Freddie is being seen with many different men, but as Freddie is throwing these crazy big costume parties that look and seem fun, it's no secret that they are full of debauchery as well. Freddie is also fond of visiting nightclubs in New York City in the early 80s. At that time, it's known that HIV is spreading through the city of New York at a fast rate. Freddie would say in an interview that his sex drive was enormous and that he was not shy about it. Jim Hutton would fall into Freddie's life when the two would find one another in a bar called Heaven. Freddie would offer Jim a drink, but Jim, who did not recognize Freddie as the rock superstar, turned him down. But as fate would have it, the two would meet again in time. But in that time and space, while Freddie is not with Mary or Jim romantically, he would have many different relationships that would not last long. It's no secret to Freddie's friends or even Freddie's bandmates that Freddie is in and out of relationships very fast. But Freddie's 39th birthday has come up in September of 1985, and a party has been set. The invites are out, the time is set, and Freddie is not shy about having a party. Queen is playing their last show in 1986, and that will be it for Freddie in doing live performances with Queen. 1986 will be a rough year for Freddie. There was a relationship Freddie would have that would hurt him in the end. That is the relationship of Paul Printer. This would end in a messy way for both men. Paul was Freddie's personal assistant for a long time before going on to be the manager of Queen after they had fired their existing manager. Paul's time with Queen was up and down over the time he worked for the band. It's never aired publicly that Freddie and Paul are dating, but it is confirmed in the inner circle of the band that they are on and off again. Paul and Freddie will have a huge fight one day in 1986, and that will end with Paul being kicked out of Freddie's life and the band for good. But Paul would have revenge. Paul would be so upset with Freddie that he would write to a newspaper in their relationship in a story he sold to the Sun magazine in 1987. Paul would claim that Freddie slept with hundreds of men and that 2 of his former partners passed away from AIDS. Paul would also reveal that Freddie was in a relationship with a man that went by the name Jim Hutton, but as time would have it, in a weird circumstance, Paul would die of AIDS-related complications in August of 1991. It would just be 3 months before Freddie would come to his last breath. In the late 80s, Freddie would be still working very hard at making music and live his life with his last love, Jim Hutton. Before Freddie became extremely sick, the two would spend time traveling, seeing the world. When they were at home, they would have friends over for small dinner parties, a quiet, simple life in their home with a garden. It seemed Freddie had found his soulmate. They would have a small time together and a few Christmases to cherish with each other. But at this time in the late 80s, Freddie is positive with HIV, and he is keeping it in a small space of friends and the ones he trusts the most about it. Freddie knows he is too weak to perform with Queen. Every day, every month, every year, he becomes weaker. But in this time, Freddie is still writing music with Queen and his own music projects, just saying he wants to write and sing. Queen will make one more music video. While filming the video, it's obvious Freddie is not Freddie. He's wearing much makeup, looking frail, but he is still the Freddie of old, making jokes and people around him happy. Freddie will even say about his illness, "I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to do this." Now that it is late into 1991, Freddie is at his weakest and starting to slowly see people for goodbyes at his home. Freddie knows that he is losing the battle with his illness. In Freddie's last weeks, his old friend Mary is at his side much of the time, and Jim will be, of course, too. In the last few days of Freddie's life, he refuses to take his medication to help with his illness. The only thing he will take are painkillers. Freddie is living his life in his bed now and slowly losing his sight. Freddie would call the band's manager to his home. Freddie said that he wanted to make a public statement and a last goodbye. In this press release, this is what Freddie would say. "Following the enormous conjuncture in the press over the last 2 weeks, I wish to confirm that I have been tested HIV positive and have AIDS. I felt it correct to keep this information private to date to protect the privacy of those around me. However, the time has come now for my friends and fans around the world to know the truth, and I hope that everyone will join me, my doctors and all those worldwide, in the fight against this terrible disease. My privacy has always been very special to me, and I am famous for my lack of interviews. Please understand, this policy will continue." Just barely after 1 day of this press release, Freddie Mercury would die on November 24th of 1991, lying in his bed with his loved ones sitting around him. Freddie was tired and beat down from the illness and was just ready to go. He was so tired. His funeral was held on November 27th. Many friends and family will attend. When Freddie dies, the press will say terrible things about him, but friends and family and fans of his will defend his honor. In Freddie's will, he will leave enormous amounts of money to the ones he loves, still to this day affecting their lives. Freddie will leave Jim $500,000. His mother and father and sister, they will claim lifelong royalties, but the one that will have the biggest part of Freddie's gold is Mary. Mary will be given the house that Freddie is in now, and in the end, Mary will end up with almost 75% of Freddie's royalties. At this point in time, Mary's estate is worth $50 million. Freddie will even leave his butler and the maids $100,000 each. When we look at Freddie and his personality and who he was as a person, as a man, as a leader, as an artist, it's an unbelievable life from an unbelievable person that is so generous, so big, and you wish that you could just go back and save. This was Freddie Mercury, the King. Friends, thank you so much for watching to this point. Until we talk next time, long live the King, Freddie Mercury.